Welcome to a brand new episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Sarfo-Mensah. If this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that you return for future episodes and new content that's coming out soon. And if you are a returning listener or viewer of this podcast, as always, I thank you for always coming back. And I hope that today's episode is one that you find informative, enlightening, and insightful. So before we get to our main event, just want to remind folks to hit that red subscribe button if you're tuning in from YouTube so you can get some notifications on future episodes and any new visual content that's coming out. And with the year winding down, we have a lot of new things that are going to be coming out soon, which you'll find out about here on this podcast. And if you feel inclined to help out this platform financially as we continue to build and bring phenomenal guests on, we do accept donations on Cash App and Venmo. If you're on Cash App, our handle is IDTALK4ED. And if you're on Venmo, handle is at Kwame SM, KWAMESM. Thank you kindly. And we're back with another episode. And as we wind down the year, I know that this is a time for educators to start unwinding and start connecting with family and just taking a reprieve from what's been a long year. We've had a lot of things going on lately. We've had books getting banned in different states. We still have a lot of talk about critical race theory being banned in schools. We have conversations about gun violence and the importance of gun security. So there are a lot of hot topics that are taking place throughout our nation within the educational context. But today in particular, we want to bring ourselves back to an important issue, an important topic that we hear a lot, probably more than any other term in our education circles, and that is culturally responsive teaching. You've heard it, you've probably read about it, you may have written about it in a blog or have talked about it to a friend. However you've encountered this concept, it's something that I feel is either misunderstood by some, but it's also something that a lot of people are actually doing in practice. So I'm going to bring on someone who is all about culturally responsive teaching. She embodies it. She personifies it. She does it in practice in the classroom. She models it to others through her workshops, and she's going to bless us with some knowledge on what it is and how she's trying to get more educators to embody this important concept in their practice. So without further ado, I want to bring on a good friend of mine, partner in this work that we're doing in this space, Dr. Stephanie Boyce, to the podcast to talk to us about culturally responsive teaching, but also she has a new book out right now that's focused on this very issue. So let's dig in. Bring her on. Hey.
Hey, how you doing, Kwame?
I'm doing well. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It's almost time for that Christmas break, so I have to keep it a buck with you. I'm feeling the burn.
You feeling the burn?
I'm pushing through the burn, man. It's about that time. It's about time to unplug and really take a break. It's about that time.
Listen, you deserve the break. You've been on your grind all year long. Congrats on the book, by the way. And we'll get into the book a little later.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
And then, you're a little celebrity now, see you on the talk.
You ought to stop.
Talking to people. Listen, you big time. You big time. So
all that. I don't know about all that, but I'm out here trying to do the work. Whoever wants to give platform, ears, hearts, and minds to the work, I show up to do it. So that's what that is. Every door God opens, I'm stepping through it. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. So let's talk now.
Okay.
So I know you are in Texas.
Mhm.
Now, did you grow up in Houston?
I grew up in Dallas, but I went to the University of Houston for undergrad. So then I ended up spending about maybe 7 or 8 years in Houston. I started teaching in Houston, got
All
my
right, so
down there before I moved back.
Dallas, then Houston. Okay, go
Mhm.
Cougars, right? They Cougars.
Yeah, go cool.
Yeah, go Cougars. All right, that's
Yes,
what's up.
that's it.
All right, so let's talk about your upbringing
Oh,
because we all have a beginning
yeah.
before we got into education. So tell me about your upbringing, in Dallas, and what ultimately brought you into the education field.
Oh man, that's okay. Two totally separate questions. So my upbringing was interesting is what I'll say. So anytime I do any speaking engagement, I always tell people, you have to cover your educational chops. Like I was a principal, I have a PhD, blah blah blah, all these things that matter. But then I always tell them, but before I was any of those things, I was Steph B. And Steph B was this kid in school who had some extreme math deficits, who, like a lot of students, didn't know how to work through issues with anger and things that going on at home and all these kind of things. And so I like to explain to educators how, for me, those things manifested themselves as behavioral issues in classrooms. So I had two placements in alternative school. I was arrested when I was 16. Um, I would run away from home, fight my peers, fight my mama. Like I was kind of a hot mess for a while. You know what I mean? So I always share that with educators when I'm trying to encourage them to understand that they actually make a difference. Like you can be the difference. Like giving a kid first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chance, how many chances they need, you know what I'm saying, to bring them back into the learning community when they have made a mistake and they need another chance. They need you to believe in them. They need you not to write them off as the terrible kid and just kick them to the corner and, you know what I mean,
Yeah,
marginalize them in the school community. So I always start out with that and help them to kind of build a framework of understanding around those kind of experiences inform what I did by becoming an educator. You know what I'm saying? That's why I became an educator anyway, because I had some phenomenal educators along the way that were like, girl, you going to get your life together. We don't know when, but you going to get your life together. And so that's kind of a little bit about my upbringing. But I came to education, fully for this work that I'm doing now. That's why I came, to be the change I wish I had in those schools, in those classrooms.
wow. So in a nutshell, you had educators that gave you a fresh start. See what I did right
You see
there.
what you did there? So pick it fresh. Yeah. I see what you did there. Yeah, I did. I had some, but now along the way, then still at the school that, the schools that I went to, I still had those educators that were just committing educational malpractice on a regular basis and collecting the paycheck at our expense. Full stop. So, it's those kind of people. When you have those teachers that are phenomenal and go the extra mile, you as a student, they have an understanding, even though they don't have the language to articulate the disparities between how teachers show up. They understand, and intuitively they understand how they feel. They understand that love, that care, and they understand when it's not there as well.
Oh, you are absolutely right.
Yeah.
As a student, I don't care what age you are,
Hmm.
they have a radar that lets them know which teachers are invested, which ones are
Mhm.
just there to get the bread, right?
For real.
Like they know they may not be able to vocalize it,
Right.
but they can feel it, they can sense it. And
Hmm.
then for some, they even internalize it to where
Mm.
they don't even want to open up to those teachers when they are in the midst of a struggle,
Yeah.
whether it be internal or external.
Yeah.
So
Right.
no, that's for sure.
Hmm. So that's
So
for me.
yeah. So let's talk about this fresh. perspective, right?
Mhm.
Because I feel like we are in a state in our education system where we just need a fresh start with everything. We need a fresh start with our systems. We need a fresh start with our curriculum. Some of
Yes.
our teachers need fresh starts with their pedagogical practices.
Mm.
There are a lot of things that require a fresh start,
Yeah.
right? And I'm pretty sure as you were going through your career, you recognize that, man, like this is something that a lot of teachers need. So
Yeah.
let me do something about it. So you decided to start your own company, the Fresh Classroom.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. What led you there?
Oh man, it's
And
crazy.
yeah,
I didn't even I was not looking to start a business like at all. Full stop. I just what happened was I was an instructional coach at the high school level, and when I took over the position of over the ELAR department, the writing scores were at 29 and 31% for English 1 and English 2.
is
Uh,
that proficient?
it 29 and 30 29% proficient, yeah, and
Okay,
30% proficient,
gotcha.
or
Wow. All right.
approaching standards. So after our first year doing the work that we were doing, the scores went to 50% and 51%. After the second year to 61 and 61%. And so the one of the ladies that was coaching me at the central office came and to talk to me, and she was like, "Hey, you know, we need to talk about what it is y'all are doing in the department. We're seeing the gains, we're seeing the outcomes with the students. What is it that y'all are doing?" And I didn't have the language to articulate it at that time. I'm just like, you know, we've been working together, you know, in our teams, we've been making the lessons, you know, we try like like making that. And she's like, no, 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 that's not something we can reproduce, like making the lessons. So like, you have to sit down and find a way to explain in a strategy what it is that y'all are doing so that you could reproduce it or share it with another teacher next year when they join the team. Otherwise, what you get is pockets of teams of teachers that do phenomenal work,
Mhm.
but that work stays within their little silo. And
Sure.
so I sat down and I just took some time to really go through it. And, you know, as we do as educators, I don't know why these acronyms always emerge, but that's what happened. And so the F is for fun. We were being intentional about trying to make the lessons more fun, make our classrooms more fun, relevant. We were finding ways to connect the content we had to teach with the students that we serve and be the bridge there. Engaging, we were trying to find ways to increase student engagement. And then the S is for standards based. Of course, you have to keep it aligned to the standards, even when you're trying to up the fun factor. And the H is for higher order. We were trying to find ways to connect in deep and meaningful ways from student to community, to have our lessons be higher order in terms of being outside of the boxes of our classrooms. So that's kind of where it started. I just started doing the training on a local level at regional conferences and state conferences, of course, for free. I would just go if they would accept my proposal. And from that, teachers started to come up to me after the training saying, "We need you on our campus." I'm emailing my principal. She wants to know how much you charge. And I'm like, charge? I don't know. How much do people charge to tell you what they're doing? And my business
Right.
was born at the request of teachers. And for me, that was very important because I've been in education a while and teachers are not regularly requesting more professional development. So I was like, we might be on to something here. And that's how the business was born.
Don't you find it amazing how a business just falls into your lap? Like I didn't grow up thinking I'm going to be an entrepreneur.
Mm,
No way did I think I'll be doing this, like all
right.
this stuff. These
Hmm.
are just things that happened out of circumstance.
Right.
Um, in my situation, it started with a book
Mm,
that I wrote during my paternity leave when my son was born, or 4 years
mm,
ago now. And I wrote the book. I was proud that I finished the process, and I thought, okay, that's it. And then a friend of mine tells me, Kwame, you got some great content here. You should probably go around to different schools and do workshops so they can have access to this content because not everybody reads a book.
mm, mm,
So how are you going to channel this information into different mediums?
mm,
So then I started to take days off and discreetly go to different districts that were neighboring mine to do some workshops, most of which were free, some for small honorariums. And I started to build, my profile there, started to get my feet wet with
Mhm.
presenting and doing workshops and seminars. And then it just got to a point where I just said, all right, let me just start an LLC. And that's really how Identity was born, you
Yeah.
know. And then from there, everything else happens: the summit, the podcast, other books, other things. So it just kind of snowballed into what it is now. But in no way did I envision all that happening. So I always find it interesting when people share their stories on how they
Yeah.
entered entrepreneurship.
Well, I think it's important what you're saying because it's about the intention behind it. You know what I mean? It's about staying true to the teacher in you. See what I did there?
Ah,
Because what happens is, if it's born in terms of a necessity in the marketplace, it's teachers saying, we need this, we want to see this, we need to hear this more, as opposed to some people who go into their space saying, I'm going to create an educational firm, an educational company. I'm going to do it. Their primary focus is on them and getting into a certain space for the sake of making money. And we've seen and experienced those kind of PDs as educators, enough so that, a lot of educators can almost smell the BS from a mile away.
yep.
They'll get at the end of a training and be like, I bet they ain't never do that with kids like we got at this school. Or, they immediately start to challenge and be defensive of everything the presenter puts on if it's not real and they haven't kept it a buck with the teachers and they don't have the real rooted experiences. Teachers feel that, I think. And so congrats to you, man.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Mhm.
So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we're in a very, for lack of a better term, tumultuous time in our educational system. And I know with you being in Texas, I've been hearing a lot about Governor Abbott and some of the moves he's been making with regard to trying to ban books and, talk with critical race theory and why it shouldn't be in schools. And mind you, there are a lot of other red states that are doing the same thing. But
Mhm.
for some reason, it always seems like Texas is front and center when it comes to a lot of
Yeah.
these issues.
Yeah.
So, as someone who is residing in the state
Hmm.
and has a closer perspective on what's going on, I'm
Hmm.
wondering, has all this controversy, has all this propaganda in any way impacted your ability to do what you do with the fresh classroom?
Hmm. That's a good question. My business is actually about to hit a brand new record for January bookings. People that
That's
want
a good
truth gonna
sign.
see. Educators
That's a
are
good sign.
not sheeple. All of you know what I mean? So what happens in a state like Texas is because I'm from here, we are used to, how they say everything's bigger in Texas, even sometimes the bigotry, right? So we are not opposed, we are not confused. In Texas, you understand things to be how they are. I've been in places where I think some people, they like their bias a little more implicit. Okay, you're going to a lot of times already understand the dynamics at play. So for instance, legislators going to legislate, right?
Yep.
And two, the benefit of the people who have voted them in, they want them to see, hey, this is something that matters. Republicans especially need to galvanize people around different issues in order to make sure they feel like, hey, we've done something about the things you care about, come vote for us again. That's just a given. Politicians gonna politic. But and when it comes to
Yep.
educators and educational institutions, what we know is that a lot of times teachers, even if just theoretically, are usually on a more progressive or liberal end of the spectrum in terms of they are college educated, one, and two, they want to feel like they are trying to embrace progress, and that really is rooted in a love for kids usually. You know what I mean? You do
Yes.
have some situations that be crazy. I'm not going to act like that's not the case. So I think for me, why I see a record breaking January is that educators are not going to be swayed by things that politicians do. And so when a politician passes a law that says you can't make somebody feel uncomfortable by talking about race in a way that blah, 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 all these flowery words, what we know is when we see that, I have educators at the top of districts that I've had conversations with that say, there's nothing enforceable about this law. This is pageantry. This is symbolism. This is throwing red meat to your base. There is nothing enforceable when you look at the law. Who's coming to my classroom to arrest me when I talk about whatever I talk about? Ain't nobody but my school board on a local level that's going to control what I do and if I get fired or if I don't get fired at the end of the day. So we do have some extreme circumstances. But when it comes to CRT, specifically, what I started to tell people off top was just like, when they come to your school board meetings acting a fool, just concede. We don't want CRT in our schools. Very well. Nobody was teaching CRT to your kids, no way. So just tell them very well. We agree. We won't teach any CRT. Now the problem is what happened was some people tried to start pivoting, some conservative groups and think tanks or whatever they consider themselves, and start to use CRT as this umbrella ideology for anything that has to do with conversations about race, social justice, like anything related to anti-racism, like anything. It's just like, oh, that's the CRT stuff. So I think we have to be careful in a state like Texas because those of us that live here, we know how to navigate. When we go into our schools and our districts with our school boards, we know that we're going to teach what's truth in terms of historical perspectives. Like anytime a big thing happens, it's like, oh my God, there was a textbook in Texas that said da 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 da. And people were like not shaken that are in the classrooms because there's a lot of people that are committed to teaching truth. And so, you know, I spent time in the legislative session this last go round, meeting with representatives, talking to them, talking about best interests, talking about the importance of, at the end of the day, they vote on party lines. It didn't matter what you said. It didn't matter what you said was best for kids and teachers and how teachers don't need any more restrictions right now. When it came to all the CRT talk, they voted on party lines and that's just what they do. So I think it's a better use of our time, as especially in this space doing this work, to focus on the main thing, and that's teachers. So that's what I do. I go into schools and I train teachers directly, and we're talking about the difference between race and culture and what are the levels of culture and how you connect to students and how you check yourself and reflect on your own cultural inclinations as to not have cultural clashes in your. So like we're having these conversations and doing this work. And so people get so caught up in the semantics that I just let them have it sometimes. That's why I don't get caught up in the semantics. I just get steady with the work.
There you go, the work. And this is what I always try to stress to teachers. We're the experts. We actually went to school to do what we do. So when these laws and policies and these forms of legislation come about, we have the expertise, I would hope, to navigate that and finesse our instruction in a way such that they will never know that we're actually teaching truth in our classrooms.
Listen,
because right now you have a lot of politicians and a lot of these parent advocacy groups putting out these checklists for words that you should look for in a lesson plan, words you should look for in a curricular framework. If you see those words, those are red flags. Okay, I don't need to use those words to still teach truth.
but don't. Yeah, and it's the same way when we passed up. We got well, the same was true when in Texas, what was it, about 2 years ago now, we got the African American Studies course passed. In order to get it voted for the State Board of Education, there were some people that couldn't be included in the curriculum, to include Malcolm X, to include the Black Panther Party. So you can imagine, I'm sitting on a call with some people like, to hell, you can't have no African American. But mind you, I'm an African American Studies minor at the University of Houston, right? where I got my undergrad degree. and now I'm a professor of African American Studies at the University of Houston, right? So I'm like, the hell? You can't talk about this without talking about this. But the truth is, in a state like Texas, you have to know how to get things moved. And if those were the two things that were on that list that some red people wasn't gonna vote for, oh, I barricaded the door. My child's trying to get in. Then you remove those things, but you also include some essential people that in your research of them would definitely lead you to research into some other things that they wouldn't have included. You see what I mean? So if I include some other names and some other important figures that are not to you Malcolm X, but he maybe worked very closely with Malcolm X in such a way that researching him would lead you to Malcolm X. You see what I mean? Like, you find ways to move the work, and you have to navigate in this red tape and all this foolishness. But at the end of the day, when you're here, you understand that progress might not be as speedy as you would like it. Or you look at another state and you say, dang, they just passed this and this and this. But at the end of the day, you know, we still have to do this work. And where's the work? The work is in the classrooms with the teachers. So
I think, a long story short, we have to take an Underground Railroad approach to doing this.
Do, you know, and do.
Yeah, we have to. Because I feel like in many cases we are smarter than the very politicians who are protesting against CRT and anything that's related to race or anti-racist teaching.
For sure.
We have the expertise. We can get past all. So, staying on this, how can we get to a place, or will we ever get to a place where politicians, I don't care what party they're on, or just education officials, will just gain a fresh perspective on anti-bias, anti-racist education? Will we ever get to that place? Ever in this lifetime?
Education officials and politicians, maybe not. We might not. I think for me, that's not where I know that politics is about power. And
yes,
in a capitalistic society, that's about the money. You know what I mean? So when I'm thinking about politicians, I'm thinking about, what is the purpose for someone to run for political office? It's not the money that they make. If you look at the money that they get paid to hold the position, it's about the power. It's about the perks that you get because you represent this, and you can vote on that. Is somebody going to slot you something here and give you VIP access there? It's about the positionality. It's about being a figurehead, and it's about having power. Yes. Occasionally, it's about serving the people. Okay. All right. So for me, I think if that's your motivating factor for a lot of people that are in this, it's a game. It's all a game. Like the politics, it's all like who you know. This is what you do. This is how we. And like I told you, I spent some time down there this year, and I was like, I'm not coming back down here again. You're not going to waste my life. I could have been in schools with teachers. Like, this is a waste of life. And so I don't think so. Especially, I don't use the term anti-racist in my work. When I am, especially in a state like Texas, and I'm going into a school in East Texas, where, and you know, in our state, the majority of teachers are white, and the majority of them female, I don't use the term anti-racist, even though I've read the work. I understand the idea of the work. I'm a scholar. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to go into a room with people who haven't done any of this work. Somebody in a training I went to one time was explaining it like lifting weights. Like, if I think about doing this work like pumping weights, I got big muscles. You know what I mean? Like, I've been doing this work. I'm going to read the 1619 Project book, just came out. I'm going to read that. I'm going to consume it. I'm going to learn something new. What is Isabel Wilkerson and Cast. You know what I mean? Or The Warmth of Other Suns, or like whatever it is. Like, this is my thing. I've been reading. I'm minored in African American studies. Like, I have whatever. So like, there's some things we could talk about. I can read something and decipher like, oh yeah, I feel that, or oh, I got a question about that. A little pushback there. The same way scholars are going to do when they read my book, because we've been doing this work. There's going to be some parts that you say, Boyce, I don't know about that, or blah. But at the end of the day, for me, I can't walk into a school where some teachers have not even in their teacher prep program ever even had conversations about racial bias. Never even had conversations about what's the difference between race and culture. That's not the same thing. Why do we need to talk about the difference before we start talking about culturally responsive teaching, such that you can understand and have a full understanding? We got to talk baby steps. You know what I mean? Like, we got to talk, like, this is your introduction to, oh, there's actually bias. Oh, this is why these conversations matter, because some people, I think, get in over their head when they go straight all the way up and they're trying to get into these theoretical conversations, but their fundamental understanding is limited in terms of these basic conversations in general. And so I don't think politicians will, as long as, that's a whole nother book for a whole nother day. You familiar with Claude Anderson in Powernomics? He talks about how we have to establish communities, African Americans. We have to establish communities, and not just neighborhoods where we have houses, but our businesses and ownership and these things that accumulate wealth. And then we can influence some politicians. But as long as you don't have any money or any influence, you can't influence politicians. Their job is to make the people that vote them in happy by doing what they want them to do.
All right. Now, you just talked about culturally responsive teaching and how a lot of pre-service teachers don't get exposed to it or the nuances of it during their training. Over the years, I've seen a lot of scholars, teachers, and other people interchange the terms culturally responsive teaching and culturally relevant teaching. And there was a point in time where I even thought they were interchangeable. But after you read Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings, who is the OG, the godmother when it comes to this.
She is the OG. Yeah. That's why I bookmarked this page in my book when I saw you ask that question.
Yep. Dr. Geneva Gay.
The OGs.
Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum. Like, I can go on and on, but we've seen an evolution of this term.
Definitely.
Over the years.
Yeah.
Some see it as culturally responsive teaching. Some see it as multiculturalism. Some may see it as another term, but ultimately,
social justice, pedagogy,
right? Culturally sustaining practices, Django Paris. Like, pretty much, they all stem from that same line of scholarship. All those people that we're mentioning has had influence from the OG, Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings. So it's all on that chain.
Right.
So I'm wondering from you, just from your research and all the work you've done in this area, what do you think, or what do you know is a difference between those two, culturally responsive teaching and culturally relevant teaching? How can we differentiate between that?
Okay, I'm gonna take you to page 136 of my book, because that was one thing. So the term I use on the book's cover is culturally relevant education, and it's more of an umbrella term by Aronson and Lafter that it kind of encompasses both of those. And so basically here, in order to differentiate between the two, I kind of just spell out one, Geneva Gay's definition of CRT, or culturally responsive teaching, is using the cultural characteristics, experiences, and perspectives of ethnically diverse students as conduits for teaching them more effectively. So this approach is more focused on teachers and their teaching practices in the classroom to meet the needs of their students. But CRP, or culturally relevant pedagogy, expands those teaching practices to include concepts of social justice that extend beyond the classroom. So Ladson Billings is defining CRP as a pedagogy of opposition that's committed to collective, not merely individual empowerment. Culturally relevant pedagogy rests on three criteria or propositions. A, students must experience academic success. I think we all can agree on that. B, students must develop or maintain cultural competence. And then C, students must develop a critical consciousness through which they challenge the status quo of the current social order. I think that's the biggest difference for me as a practitioner and a researcher, is this extension of it from outside of what we're doing in the classroom to being critically conscious of the systems that create the oppression in the first place. And that's a piece that I think is, even in higher ed, I mean, you think as a default in higher ed, that's what people do, right? They're challenging students to but even sometimes people have to be pushed to consider developing the critical consciousness of students. And that includes the systems that they're actually participating in. So that means you have to have teachers that are even aware and conscious themselves, or they cannot cultivate the critical consciousness of students.
Wait, hold up, sister. You mean to tell me that people in academia can be like that?
Can be complicit in maintaining yes, social injustice in higher ed spaces for sure. And we see all kind of disparities with completion, and that's a whole nother talk for a whole nother day. But yeah, like that, but that lack of that critical consciousness, and even with people of color, is what I'm always explaining the difference between race and culture in my training, because I train lots of people of color, especially, I hate to say in my experience, some older people, that when you start talking about, for instance, like I talk about students having cultural wealth when they come to you, how they're not empty cups, how they're full of so much. And I remember having a teacher like being very confused in one of my trainings, like, so what you're saying is, so what I'm saying is like, so I shouldn't tell them that how they talk is wrong. You should not. We have to have these conversations about how a student speaking African American Standard Vernacular, AASV, is not that it's wrong, dirty, or broken. It's not your responsibility to fix them, clean them up, and make them all shiny and new and remove them for their communities and save them. It's not about you saving them. It's about you adding to what they already have, but appreciating and valuing their own communal ways of being and knowing. And for some people, that's rocket science. Even some people that look like they're students, because their cultural backgrounds are so very different sometimes. So, yeah.
And for folks that want to learn more about cultural wealth, community cultural wealth, y'all need to check out Dr. Tara Yoso. She has a whole publication on community cultural wealth, where she talks about the different forms of capital, linguistic capital that you mentioned, navigational capital,
aspirational capital.
All there.
It's all there, and it's also in my book, because I also refer to her that. I remember the first time I read that, I was like, yes, we do have all that, even when you come from the hood. And
come on now. Listen, and that's a critical race scholar, y'all. So you have people who are telling y'all what you need to do.
Yeah.
We just need to embrace this knowledge, this sacred knowledge, and just apply it. We just have to do it. It's out there. It's been out there.
Because otherwise you would really miss an opportunity to grow a student and to understand, because I think it might have been Chris Emden I was listening to when he was saying, like, these schools are really like we're going to teach kids how to have grit. Like, you're not going to come to the hood and teach a kid how to have grit. We just ran an extension cord from down the other house to get lights over here, baby. We got grit. That ain't it. You know what I mean? So it's just these ideas of like kids coming as empty cups because they're in under-resourced communities. Notice I didn't say poor. They're in under-resourced communities. So you think, oh, they're broken, and you feel pity for them and like, oh, but that's not what they need to level up. You know what I mean? So that's a whole nother work that's definitely worth leaning into.
Yeah, we're not asking for saviorism. We're not asking for that.
At all.
No.
At all.
No. Wow. But it's something that we just need to work on our teacher education programs, because even now in 2021, we still have a lot of teachers going through an entire practicum and still not coming out with a fundamental understanding of what it means to be a culturally responsive teacher, whether it's through our interactions with students, whether it's through our instruction, whatever aspect of our craft we want to focus on. We're still not seeing that. We're still seeing that at a deficit. And it's like, how?
I hate to say by design, but like I was just talking when I intentionally, when I meet people in educator prep programs in higher ed, I will ask them, so like, when do students have, and I've noticed some people, they've tried to do better. They might like slot a reading in or books, as a part of an overall class on like multiculturalism or like whatever urban education class they have that's going to talk about a whole lot of other things. But I'd say there's some people, they're not even doing that much. And the truth is, it's doing more harm than good when these teachers come out of these classrooms thinking they're about to be hunky-dory, going into these schools with these theories that they've learned. And then they get their butts kicked when they walk into schools and they're not, until they can get some training. But I also, I have some districts that I work with. There's one in particular, Texarkana ISD. They, for all the new teachers that come to their school, they do this training off top. You know what I mean? The fresh approach to classroom management, because they want them to they want to give them what they already know they're not getting. So it's like on one hand, I'm like, dang, these teacher prep programs need to do better. And on the other hand, I'm like, these school boards need to be better. You need to hold people accountable for giving the teachers what they need when they're coming in the door. So superintendents, they have to do a better job. School leaders have to do a better job of assessing, okay, we already know what the shortcomings are over here, and this is how we fill those gaps in practical ways. So, yeah.
All right. And I just have one more question on this before we jump into the fresh classroom, your book and everything.
Okay.
So when going back to the culture responsive teaching and culture relevant teaching piece.
Okay.
Whenever this comes up, personally, I think it's analogous to how people interchange the terms diversity and decolonization, right? Where it's like, okay,
not the same thing.
Definitely not the same, but people really believe it's the same. Like, okay, because when I think about cultural responsiveness, and I know this is not right, but some people think, oh, it's just an acknowledgement of the different cultures in my classroom. Let me put a child's name inside a word problem. Let me know that they are seen.
Yeah.
Let me just get books
and
libraries that have different color faces, just to say, hey,
responded to the culture of the students. Yeah.
But then we think about relevance, which I believe corresponds with the colonization. Now it's like, okay, we had the different faces. Good. We checked off that box. What kind of stories are being told? What kind of narratives are being pushed in these books?
Right.
How are these characters being portrayed? Are we taking that other step?
Yeah.
Towards
you're getting into the critical consciousness then, right?
Yeah.
You're leaning into having that next level conversation. And when I'm doing a training, I'm always looking at how once you tap in and you better understand the students, their interests, their backgrounds, their cultural inclinations, then what does it look like to incorporate that into your instructional practice? Do I just know it? Like, oh yeah, now I know more about, let's say, Jaquan and what he plays football on the weekend, or like whatever other thing might be going on. Like, but then like, how do you take that and then turn it into and be a bridge builder between what you understand about kids, their culture, their backgrounds, their whatever, and then how do you tie that into the actual learning experiences that take place in your classroom? Like that's a whole other thing to make it relevant to them. That's a little bit more difficult than just having representation and yeah.
Right.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So now we talk about the book. Let's shift to the book. The Fresh Classroom. Why culturally responsive teaching can't wait.
Yeah.
Now, you broke down what fresh means. So the first few, fun, relevant, engaging. Now, there are some teachers who you may have come across in your many workshops you've done who will say, I don't know how to be a fun teacher, because fun is subjective, right? We all view fun in different ways, right? So for those teachers that believe, man, I'm not really the fun teacher. I just teach. How do I make my instruction fun, right? what did that look like for me?
Yeah.
I'm sure you've come across teachers who have asked that
Yeah.
question.
I don't, because when we get to the F, I break it down and spend that segment of the training on how can you make your teaching more fun tomorrow. And that's the same thing that's in the
Okay.
book. So what
Got it.
happens with the book and with the training that I do is we move from the theory of culturally relevant standards-based teaching to what does that look like in the classroom? Because for me as an educator, that was the piece that was missing. I was getting training sometimes and somebody would talk to us about something, but the piece that has to be present is what does that look like in practice? So when we go into the F, then I will start giving them, you can up the fun factor in your class tomorrow by doing these things right here. By just adding these things into your mix on a weekly basis, you could up the fun factor. And then let me show you how I did that in some classrooms. And then we get to see some examples. So I think that's the difference, is that they don't ask, how do I do it? They're going to get told and shown how to do it while they're spending their time either reading the book or being with me in the training.
Right.
Yeah.
And then getting back to the acronym FRESH,
Mm-hmm.
and going back to the fun piece,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, and I know that all the terms are interconnected, right? They all interconnected. We need all those things to happen in order for the classroom to be fresh. But I know, just from being in the classroom and from having different colleagues, because of different circumstances and just being in the districts we're in, we tend to focus on the S,
Mm-hmm.
the standards based, because
Mm-hmm.
depending on where you are, and for many of us, we're doing some iteration of the Common Core curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
They may call it a different name, but we're doing some iteration of Common Core.
Right.
And we spend so much time looking at objectives and the standards that it takes away from the fun in the lesson. It takes away from the fun
Mm-hmm.
in the learning. So in the book, how do you stress to educators that even though all these things are interconnected with each other,
Yeah.
there has to be a healthy balance, if you will, that
Yeah.
has to take place?
So on page 44, when they get the book, I have a little Venn diagram, and the theory that I root my fresh theory in is called CRSB. That's culturally responsive standards based teaching. Essentially, what it says is we have to have a perfect marriage between two things. So most educators get about 80% of their PD on standards based teaching, like you just said. In terms of it says, I'm gonna show you this little. See my little Venn diagram right there. Can't really see it that good.
All
Okay.
right, I'm gonna zoom in. Let me zoom in.
Oh. Okay. Let me see.
I'll zoom in.
Oh, look at you. You so fancy.
Come
So
on now.
on the black side where it says standards-based teaching, it's looking at ensuring rigor, providing high levels of learning, ensuring or including regular assessments, and pushing students towards mastery of content. That's where teachers get about 80% of their PD already. But CRSB says we have to equally train them, prepare them for the culturally responsive teaching side. And that's where you get your including. Let me see. Let me scoot over so you can see this side too.
All
What?
right.
Am I slow? There we go. Improving motivation, increasing engagement, tapping into students' interests, and connecting to the communities around them. And so essentially we have to have a marriage of both. And right now what we have is the majority of everything that teachers are getting is just rooted in what the standards are, what's standards based. And we can't just run off that way, so busy trying to pass tests, that we don't include the things that matter related to what students are into, what motivates them. That's how we get the transformational learning that sticks with students. That's what I call the sticky learning. The things that you can ask people years later about a project they did in elementary or high school, and they can tell you and recount things, the sticky things, the things that mattered and were and that were impressionable in their learning experiences. So that's what we're looking towards.
Wow. Okay. All right. And it's an interesting concept because we've all gone through this. We've all gone through situations where, oh man, these kids got to come through for a brother, because if they don't get these benchmarks, I may not a good evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I may not get that proficient
Mm-hmm.
on my evaluation. I
Right.
may end up out of a job,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And a lot of us in the back of our mind know that it's important to do that culturally responsive piece, especially at the beginning of the school year and throughout, because that's what sets the tone for you to do the standards based instruction.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, if you're not tapping into those relationships early from the jump,
Yeah.
you cannot get to the instruction uh, because then there's going to be an interference
Yeah.
inevitably because
Mm-hmm.
you haven't taken the time to build a relationship with those students.
That's true. That's so true.
Yeah.
So it has to be intentional, and then it has to go hand in hand. If I'm coming into a classroom, I don't care if the lesson is aligned to the standard, if the kids are bored. If I'm coming in as an administrator, when I was a principal and I sit down and do evaluation, I don't care if your objective is on the board. I don't care if this activity is aligned to the standard. If it's lame and I'm falling asleep in your instructional experience, is what I like to call it, if I'm falling asleep in this instructional experience and I'm paid to be here, then I know they're falling asleep. It's problematic. And so to me, we can't just focus on one, without the other, because then students get left behind essentially.
So when you see this happening, and obviously context is important, right?
Right, right.
Do you feel like it's more important for you to address the administrators and then the teachers? And I'm only saying this because when that happens, not all the time, but sometimes, is because you have certain administrators who are
Mm-hmm.
helicopter school leaders. They're micromanagers. They
Yeah.
probably come into your classroom every single day just to
Yeah.
see what you're doing.
Yeah.
And they may have certain mandates in the school building that they expect all
Yeah.
teachers to follow. And
Right.
as a result, your hand is forced to have to do something that you don't want to do.
Yeah, I think it's problematic. I think, like, I was at a school one time where they tried to introduce some scripted curriculum. It was a literal script that was like, and then you say, like, teacher says, today we will blah, blah, blah. Students respond, and then you say, and I think there was enough of us like, we ain't saying that. To where they kind of backed off and were like, well, this is just, a resource to you, blah, blah. But I think what happens, I think it's most beneficial to have both, to have teachers and administrators. So when I do go do trainings, most of the time, especially because the principals that I'm going to their campuses, they have opted to have me there. They want to be a part of their training. They're saying, we need this change here. They're saying, I don't know how to support them and tell them what to do, but I know I heard you got this training and just come help, please send help. And so for those principals, they will come, they'll bring their instructional coaches, they'll pay out of their budget, their PD funds. They'll, they'll participate. They want the change. But for, if there's, for instance, like a teacher that wants to change, but they're on a campus where, they're having a hard time. What I've observed is that when teachers are aligning their work to the standards, the helicopter people, and they're seeing the outcomes with students, the helicopter people usually go away. Or the helicopter people don't say, you shouldn't be making that lesson relevant, or the kids shouldn't be getting involved, like they shouldn't be having such a good time. Typically what I've seen is administrators get up the butt when they're maybe having too much fun, but the things and the activities and the learning activities they're doing are not aligned to standards. So I find it problematic to hear you say people like trying to step up their instructional game and in their leadership, like on them, like, no, don't do that. That sounds very problematic. I haven't encountered that in the field. What I've encountered is people that are like so busy trying to be like, we being relevant and that they are not actually covering the standards, which is problematic for leaders, especially when they are trying to monitor scores, which that's a whole nother conversation for another day, and outcomes with students.
and you're mentioning a scripted curriculum. So I don't care what district you're in, they have a scope and sequence, a
Mhm.
curricular scope and sequence.
Right.
Now, if you are someone that's fresh out of a teacher residency program, or you're just fresh
Mhm.
out of your institution and you're coming to the classroom for the first time, having a scope and sequence or a scripted curriculum is a great scaffold for that first year. You're still
Yeah.
trying to feel yourself. You're still trying to get a sense of who you are as a teacher. You're still trying to get your feet wet,
Mhm.
right? But what I find problematic is in those teacher prep programs, many of them, I don't know if the pre-service teachers get enough exposure and training how to be more um, extemporaneous in their
Mhm.
instructional approach, how to be more innovative and more creative to where they can make it more fun, they can make
Yeah.
it engaging, they can make it relevant.
Yeah. I
I
think
don't
it
know if they're given that creative license to do those things.
I think the teachers that it also depends, like if you're coming from a teacher prep program. So um I used to be a supervisor in a teacher prep program at a university here in my area. I think for me, it depended on who that mentor teacher was to that student intern. If they were with a dynamic teacher that knew how to do those things that you're talking about, that knew how to be, how to change on the fly, and that was dynamic. And I've seen some one in particular that's in my mind. She was dynamic. She would transform the classroom and take them on a voyage, and they would be doing all kind of stuff. It's crazy. But that teacher now, I just actually the student intern that was with that very creative, very culturally relevant teacher, she is now mimicking that same thing. And so I just reposted on Facebook. She transformed her whole classroom into this winter wonderland. And she's always thinking about how she can engage students and connect to them in deep and meaningful ways. Well, her mentor teacher in her teacher prep program did. And so I think whoever is mentoring them is a big part of that, and trying to partner them with teachers that are very dynamic is kind of like hit or miss depending on who the teachers are at the school that are willing
True.
to take those teachers on, because some teachers are very dynamic, but they're like, I cannot take one more responsibility. I got me on every committee, every this, every that. They won't take on an intern. And some teachers are like, it's a stipend, I'll take an intern over here. And they might not even be what's up. So it's just, I don't know, like the system in and of itself is set up in a way that I just wish, like you said, the whole system needed refresh. I wish we could just hit the refresh button and just take a load off of teachers and get back to the pure organic, like what matters in the profession, and just leave all the BS outside. But that's, that's not how systems work. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So one last question before we get to lightning round.
Okay.
So Fresh Classroom has had an awesome year. A lot of different milestones, a lot of great things are coming out from there.
Yeah.
Where where do we go from here? So what do you see the future of the Fresh Classroom over
Hmm.
the next, let's say, 5 years? Where do you see
Ooh.
it?
Next 5 years.
Yeah, let's project. Let's project.
Okay, I'm looking to expand going into 2022. I'm expanding my team. I'm bringing on another PD facilitator, as I cannot divide nor multiply myself. And bringing on a new facilitator this year that can start taking some of the PD load when we have multiple bookings. I'm bringing on another person behind the scenes to help me work with some curricular things that I'm going to be doing in the upcoming year. But I'm really leaning into the Fresh Classroom. It's a nonprofit organization where we do social development as well as professional development. So I do like social events for teachers. Like we did a back to school event where, we have food and drinks and, all these types of things that celebrate and uplift teachers too. Because I think that's another thing that's missing in our space is not just the professional development, but the social development, the honoring teachers, the making them feel like the profession is worthy and that it is, for lack of a better term, Ryan Clark says, what he said, funny, sexy, and cool or something like that. You know what I mean? Trying to bring the swag back into the profession, if you will, creating networking opportunities for teachers. And so I'm really going to lean into that space a little more this year too, as I free myself up for the PD. But more speaking engagements. Had my first keynote last week. More speaking engagements, more opportunities to serve on bigger stages that God makes available. I'm just looking forward to it. I'm not sure what all that include in 2022, but I sure didn't know coming into 21 either. So I'm just really trying to stay open and expand as I'm able to bring on more people. I'm starting to understand going into year 5 of my business that I have to get some more hands on deck to make everything go. So I'm working on that for this year. Now the upcoming 5 years, man, you taking me far. I don't know, man. I'm looking at bigger stages. I'm blessed to be able to communicate this work in a way that is receptive by a lot of people. I think the core of the message is love. And if we can communicate that to people, no matter what they look like or what their political leaning is, we can help them understand that at the core of the message of the work that we do, whether you call it anti-racism, whether you call it, creating allies, whatever it is, it's the heart of the matter. And that is when people say I'm hurting, or these systems are crushing us, or your policies are not considering me, or are keeping me out or marginalizing me, do you care? That's the heart of the message is, do you give a damn? When somebody tells you I'm screaming, I can't breathe, like whatever it is, will you turn your intentions on making things and institutions and systems better? And that just really comes with connecting to the hearts of people and allowing them to hear the truth when you speak it in love. Yes. So I'm looking forward to doing that whenever and wherever I can.
Yes. Love and empathy have to be at the center of what we do
That's
in
it.
this work. It has to be at the center. That's just a non-negotiable.
For sure.
All right. So let's get into this lightning round.
Oh boy. I
have a few quick hitter questions to close us out.
Okay, I'm ready.
So you're doing a lot of work right now. You on your grind. So we need to unwind.
Okay, let's do it. I should have brought my glass of wine up in here. Okay, yes, give it to me. I'm ready.
So my question is, how do you exercise self-care?
By completely unplugging and being a bum on the couch. Like, I used to go running. I haven't really been doing that since I had a kid. I need to get back to more self-care. Let me say that. I do. I don't enough. I go out with my friends. We have cocktails and just decompress. It's another thing. And traveling. I like to go places.
All right, dope.
Mm-hmm.
So, like myself, you've had your locks for a good while. Yes. So how many years?
4 years. They're as old as my business. I started them the year I started my business.
Wow. So I'm going on I'm in year 10, going on 11.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So tell me, what is the freshest lock style that you've ever rocked? Freshest one.
I'm just a sucker for the straight up beach waves. When I get my fresh retwists, I get my ropes, and when I let my ropes down, I'm ready. I'm in full Beyonce mode. When I have my fresh, beach waves, I think that's it for me. I think when I hit them with the full fresh beach waves, yeah, that's it.
All right, cool. And you're a mother.
Mm-hmm. I am.
What is the greatest lesson that motherhood has taught you?
That the idea of control is a farce. It's an illusion. There's nothing. I mean, you don't control half of anything you think you control. I guess that's the biggest lesson, because before I had her, it took us about 4 years. We had an infertility journey. So it's like, when you spend your whole life checking off boxes and accomplishing shit, then you get to having a child. It's like, okay, body, come on, make this baby. You know what we're doing? And the body's like, no, not yet. I think that started it. And then once I had her, and she's totally like a rebel, it's like, what is control? I don't know. We just rolling at this point.
All right. And if you could invite 3 influential figures, dead or alive, to dinner, who would they be?
Oh man, I'm inviting Maya Angelou, who I got to meet before she passed. I am inviting Asada. I'm gonna be like, come,
jealous.
Asada's coming. I'm like, come back here to my dinner. Who else? I'm gonna invite Michelle Obama. I got to get one of them hugs in. Yeah, I'm gonna get one of them Michelle Obama hugs.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Flotus is reaching her quota for invitations. She's getting invited to all these dinner parties. Everybody want her at their dinner party. Everybody.
Forever First Lady. What are you gonna do? I don't know. Yes.
Yeah, can't do anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
And just to let you know, I know you're a Delta. My wife is a Delta.
Oh yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
That's all right. Yeah.
For sure. So, were you able to tune into I know they just had the conference. They were out in Atlanta this year. Were you able to tune into that?
I did not. I have like when we talked about self-care, I've been working and that's about it. I've just been working.
All right. So maybe that's a resolution. Maybe that's a resolution for 2022.
Maybe it is.
Right?
Maybe it might be. Probably not, but maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
It might be. Yeah. Pray for your girl. Pray for your girl.
I pray. I will definitely pray.
I appreciate it.
And I thank you for coming on to chat with me for a little bit. This has been great. And please bring that book up. Let people know how to get the book, how to connect with you, how to support the work. Let people know.
So the Fresh Classroom, Why Culturally Relevant Education Can't Wait, can be found on Amazon.com. Yes, you can just search Fresh Classroom on Amazon, and they'll get it to you real fast, usually in about 2 days. They'll get it to you. Or you can get the ebook there as well. Some people prefer the ebook. The audiobook will be available probably next month. So we're still working on that. But besides that, you can find me on Instagram at Fresh Classroom or Twitter at Fresh_Classroom. Or if you're on Facebook, you can search Fresh Classroom and we're on there as well. Connect with us. We do, like I said, social development for teachers. We do giveaways. We gave away a trip last year to a teacher. We'll give away gift cards. We do different things to encourage the social development, appreciation, and celebration of teachers as well. So follow us, and we'd love to meet you soon on the internet, that is.
For sure. Dr. Stephanie Boyce, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. And if we don't connect and we don't see each other before this year ends, I wish you a prosperous new year. And yeah, we're gonna hopefully do this again sometime in 2022.
Amen. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you, and continue to do the good work, man. I see you.
I appreciate it, sis. I appreciate it. All right. Have a great one.
Okay, you too. Bye, y'all.
All right, everybody. So we're about to end another episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live. And as always, I'm wishing you all a good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace out, everybody.